Now, there's been talk of Roy Halladay, the Blue Jays. Apparently, they're not interested in having the most consistent starting pitcher in baseball.
They're just it's. I don't want to say I feel bad for the Blue Jays because I don't, but you could make a case that they're one of the 10 best teams in the major leagues, and they're fourth in their division.
It does seem hopeless for them. I don't know, and for Baltimore for that matter. I mean, you talk about both teams. Toronto, they have a lot of nice pieces. Baltimore, they're talking about their young outfield being. Baltimore's outfield. They talk about that being a big upcomer.
Baltimore is terrible, though. We can agree on that. At this point,
yes, they did actually recently ask me to pitch.
Did they?
Their pitching is bad.
When was the last time you pitched actively? Let's go down to a wiffle ball level.
Here's the end of my pitching career. It's actually quite a good story. If we can break this up, maybe we can break this out on the YouTube later. I'm 11 years old, and I've been kind of asking my manager of my Little League team to pitch, even though I really can't pitch, but I want to do it because it looks fun. I want to get out there and pitch. So
middle of the diamond, everyone's looking at you.
Yeah. So we're losing a game. Let's call it 10-0 in the 5th inning, and he says, "Jonathan, you want to pitch?" I said, "Oh yeah, coach." Except my voice is high. I get out there. The opposing manager, and I'm not making this up, instructed his players, because I was a new pitcher. This isn't a 10-0 baseball game. He instructed his players to get into an extreme crouch.
As to shrink their strike zone.
To shrink their strike zone, and instructed them not to swing. So I got to 3-2 a couple of times, at least how I remember it. I walked the bases loaded. I walked in 1 run. When I walked in the 2nd run, I threw my glove on the mound and walked off the field and told my grandmother to take me home. And I don't think I even got in trouble for it because clearly the other coach,
he has a bit of a competition
was not
issue.
Being sportsmanlike, so I don't think I even got in trouble for that act.
Had this been later on in your life, you would have just turned into the wolf and then dominated.
Yes, I wish that I had that wolf option at the time because that would have been great. But yeah, so until the Orioles called me, that was it.
Anyway, Toronto.
Wait a minute! Wow, that was cold.
I hope we're gonna edit that out, right?
Oh, that was a good story. I gotta have more pop rocks.
It is a good podcast, as you can go as long as you want.
Go ahead, keep talking.
I've lost my train of thought because I'm thinking about how tasty those Pop Rocks look.
Oh yeah, those are good Pop
Rocks. I mean, Toronto, J.P. Ricciardi has been maligned for not producing a playoff team, and I believe this is the 8th year up there, and that's perfectly fair. But if you look at what Toronto has been able to do the last couple of years, if they don't have significant injuries, I know their pitching staff has been battered this year. They lost Vernon Wells for a significant chunk of last year. They have produced the last 2 or 3 years a playoff caliber team if they're in another division
or in the National League.
So there's twofold reasons I can see why they would be willing to shop Halladay. One, his best years are not necessarily behind them.
Do we know Halladay's age?
I believe he's 32.
32 years
31
old.
Or 32.
That's still in the prime of a man's life.
I mean, he at the very least is looking at the peak and is probably standing on the peak. I mean, he's not going to get any better than he is right now, and that team is not going to compete. So why not get value for him before he starts to take the inevitable march down the hill? And Ricciardi obviously has been under fire in Toronto because they're spending enough money in their mind that they should be able to compete in this division, and he's not produced a playoff berth. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't really take me out of this now. We've got these young pieces. We have good young pitching, and we're ready to start a rebuilding program. You don't want to snip my rebuilding program in the bud. So why don't you keep me on for 2 or 3 more years? I mean, I don't think that's the motivation behind it. I think it's more of the first than the second, but it's not out of the realm for trading Halladay to be a good move for them if they can get the sort of ransom.
I understand that sometimes you have to trade these guys. Certainly to the Red Sox is not going to happen, is it?
You would not. I'm not going to
rule it out.
Out on the street, it's already happened.
But
if you're talking to anybody.
Okay, here's 2 things. Here's what I would say. A, Toronto doesn't want to trade Halladay to Boston, obviously, because he's in the division. B, if Boston wants to trade for Halladay, they're going to have to give up probably 3 of their best young players.
At the very
And then they're going to see those 3 guys 20 times a year, and if they turn into big stars, that makes them look even worse.
I mean, we're talking about there can be position players involved in this because Toronto could use a bat, but we're talking about a selection of your Clay Buchholz's, your Michael Bowden's, your Daniel Bard's.
Are there more than one of those? Do you get to choose one?
I believe there are.
If there was more than one, it'd be a lot easier because you could just give them the extra ones.
You're looking at, I would say, 2 out of those 3 guys.
Well, see, here's my thing. I would do if I thought it was the right player. In my book, the player that could help, if you just look at the majors and say, of the guys that could possibly be available, who would I like to see most? I would like to see Hanley Ramirez come back, of a guy that you could get conceivably. If you could get a guy like Hanley Ramirez and have him for 4 years, you certainly would give up Nick Green or Lowry and your 2 best young pitchers because you have pitching.
I would definitely trade Nick Green for Hanley Ramirez.
So you're saying Green for Ramirez? How about I think we should trade Nick Green, give him Lugo.
Lugo, yeah.
Give him this guy.
Give him Crisp. Can we still trade Coco Crisp?
Give him Del Carmen. And, I don't know, a couple of draft picks.
They'll jump at that.
Sure.
I mean, that to
Give
me
him Harry Hooper.
Tris Speaker. He's still,
Tris Speaker?
I believe he's dead. But
I think Tris Speaker's long dead.
The Hanley
He
Ramirez
hit
kinda,
19 triples in like 1906. I think he might have passed.
06, I believe.
06, yes.
The Hanley Ramirez kind of thing
That's like
makes
3
more
years
sense
ago.
to me because obviously I'm not going to sit here and say Roy Halladay would not have a place in the Red Sox rotation. That would be ludicrous.
I would give him a spot.
However, if you look at this team and look at where they are strong,
Yes.
do you really need starting pitching? Is that really where your weakness is? Absolutely not.
Where is the weakness?
The weakness is in the lineup. And
Is it?
It's hard to call it a weakness when they're 3rd in the American League in runs, but you've got a lot of older guys in that lineup.
Right.
You know, Mike Lowell obviously jumps to mind first because he's had the problems with his hip.
Mm-hmm.
David Ortiz is an older player. You know, those guys, and you have a guy like Euclid who's developing as a power source, but Dustin Pedroia doesn't have power. You need those sort of power plant guys who can, you know, drive in runs.
But don't they have more of a classic old, 6 guys that can hit 20 type of lineup now?
They do, but at the same time, look at what's happened lately. You don't want to overstate what you've seen in the last week, but they've lost Lowell at least till the All-Star break. Well, probably till the All-Star break,
Maybe
and they've
beyond.
struggled to score runs. The bottom of that lineup is not strong, and
Really? I couldn't disagree with you more.
Nick Green.
Which,
it's not a power hitting bottom of the lineup. I will say
Veritek has 12 homers.
that's the thing, though. Veritek, more than half of Veritek's hits are extra base hits.
Okay.
That's not sustainable at all.